Hello everyone and welcome back to Sherlock Holmes. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right now, let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1, we will delve into a shocking murder case that shook Singapore in 2005. This is not a tale of tragic love, like Romeo and Juliet. It is a brutal murder masked under the guise of love. This case not only captured public attention, but also raised many questions about human nature and the dark secrets behind seemingly ordinary appearances. Around 9 a.m. on June 16, 2005, a sanitation worker cleaning the area discovered a waterlogged brown carton by the Calling River. Sensing something unusual, he approached to investigate. Inside the carton, he was horrified to find human body parts wrapped in transparent blue plastic bags and newspapers. He immediately called the police to report the grisly find. When the police arrived at the scene, they found that the carton contained the torso from the hips to the knees of a woman. The cuts on the body were remarkably clean and bloodless, indicating the murderer's cold precision and ruthlessness in dismembering the victim. The Singapore police were deeply shocked, as serious cases like this occurred only once. Every 8 to 10 years from 1970 to 2005, the police quickly sealed off the area, hoping to find the remaining body parts of the victim, given that the Callang River connects to the Singapore Strait with numerous boats entering and leaving the port daily. It was highly possible that the crime was committed on a boat and the body was dumped into the sea, with the carton eventually drifting to the Callang River. Thus, the police simultaneously investigated the schedules of boats that had passed through the Calling River Bay in the past 2 days and conducted a thorough search of the surrounding areas of the crime scene. About an hour later, they discovered another red carton not far away containing the upper torso of the body but without the head. The cuts on this torso matched perfectly with the previously found body parts. Fortunately, the upper torso still had the arms and hands, allowing the police to identify the victim through fingerprint analysis. Additionally, the carton had a barcode and product information. Using this lead, the police traced the carton back to a store in Singapore. After 6 hours of fingerprint matching, the police finally identified the victim. She was a 22-year-old woman named Lu Hong from a small town in Chongchun, Guilin province. China Lu Hong had been in Singapore for 3 years and was working at an electronics factory at 5 North Songan Avenue. Once they confirmed her identity, the police went to the factory where Liu Hongge worked to conduct a thorough investigation. Through learning about El Hong's relationships, the police identified 2 individuals of interest, Fu Ruqing and Liang Xiao. Both were former supervisors of Lu Hong and had close relationships with her. The police first interrogated Fu Ruqing. Throughout the interrogation, he remained remarkably calm. According to his testimony, Liang Xiao had a romantic relationship with Lu Hongge. Initially, Lu Hongge worked in workshop number 4 under his supervision. Seeing her diligence, he frequently showed concern and helped her a lot. Later, Liang Xiao was transferred to a managerial position and Li Hong became his subordinate. From that point, Liang Xiao and Lu Hong's relationship quickly developed. One day they were scheduled for the night's shift, which ended at 7 a.m. the following morning. However, when they returned to work, and they were still wearing the same clothes from the previous day, indicating that they had not gone home. Liang Xiao and Lu Hong maintained their secret relationship until a colleague discovered it last year. The information provided by Fu Ruqing matched perfectly with a record of inappropriate behavior involving Liang Xiao and Liu Hongge that the police had uncovered. This document, issued by the company on September 27, 2004, detailed the misconduct of an operator and a manager at the office, noting that the manager was married, making their behavior unacceptable after being reprimanded by company leadership. Liu Hongge immediately admitted her mistake. In contrast, Yang Xiao defended himself, claiming that he was only congratulating Liu Hongge on her birthday and had no other intentions. However, following this incident, their colleagues became aware of their relationship. During this period, Liu Hong was promoted twice consecutively, leading many to believe that she was being backed by her manager. The police then proceeded to interrogate Liang Xiao. During this conversation, the police identified Liang Xiao as the Prime suspect in the case, Liang Xiao was born on April 19, 1955 in Singapore. After completing his pre-university education, he served in the military for 2 years. In 1976, he began working at a telecommunications company where he remained for 20 years. In 1996, Liang Xiao decided to leave and start his own business. However, due to limited capabilities, he had to close it down. After just 1 year since April 1997, he has been working at an electronics factory. Liang Xiao's salary was approximately 33,700 Singapore dollars a month, which was considered quite high at the time and sufficient to provide his family with a stable life. He was married and had 3 children, 1 son and 2 daughters. At the time of the incident, his wife and eldest daughter were traveling in Thailand while his son and youngest daughter were at school. So what led the police to suspect Liang Xiao as the primary suspect in the case? First, during the interrogation, he consistently denied having a close relationship with Liu Hongge and accused the police of making baseless assumptions. Second, there was a scratch on the knuckle of his left middle finger, but when asked how he got the injury, he stammered and couldn't provide a clear explanation. Additionally, during the conversation, his hands trembled continuously and his face showed clear signs of tension. These behaviors aroused further suspicion from the police. As a result, the police requested to search Liang Xiao's home upon hearing this. He appeared slightly panicked but had no choice but to agree. After some time searching, the police found several crucial clues in Liang Xiao's room. These included a Chinese newspaper, a bundle of blue plastic bags, a roll of tape, a rubber hammer, and a chipped kitchen knife. The plastic bags, newspaper, and tape were then sent to the forensic science department for examination. The results showed that these items were identical to those found in the carton containing the body parts. Therefore, the police initially concluded that the rubber hammer and kitchen knife were the tools Liang Xiao used to dismember the victim. Since using a kitchen knife to cut through a human body is not easy, Liang Xiao had used the hammer to assist. However, these tools alone were not enough to prove that Liang Xiao was the one who killed Li Hongge to convict him. The police needed to find more definitive evidence, such as blood traces at the crime scene matching the victim's DNA or finding a fragment from the chipped knife in the victim's body. Fortunately, no such metal fragments were found in the body parts. Discovered, therefore, the police needed to locate Liu Hong's head and lower legs to gather more clues on the other hand. Since Liang Xiao had cleaned the crime scene meticulously, the police thoroughly searched the entire house but still couldn't find any bloodstains. Even more puzzling was that, according to the police's assessment, Liang Xiao's home was likely the primary crime scene, and the most probable place for dismemberment was the bathroom. However, this area was unusually clean, clearly having been thoroughly cleaned by him. Despite the circumstances, the police were ultimately unable to find any additional clues. When the police were at a standstill and considering changing the direction of their investigation, one of the officers suddenly remembered a case from 10 years ago. The situation was very similar to the current one. Although the bathroom had been meticulously cleaned, they still found a drop of blood under the sink. Recalling this, the police officer immediately sat down to thoroughly inspect the sink but found nothing. As he was about to stand up, his gaze was drawn to the nearby toilet. After a careful examination, he finally discovered a dark red stain, 2 millimeters in diameter, on the underside of the toilet bowl. After comparing the DNA, the police confirmed that it was Liu Hong's blood. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Liang Xiao confessed to his crime. However, there were still many questions about his motive and the process of committing the crime. Therefore, the police urged him to quickly disclose all details in order to receive leniency from the law. According to Liang Xiao's confession on June 15, 2005, taking advantage of the fact that his wife and eldest daughter were traveling abroad and his son and youngest daughter were at school, he invited Liu Hongge to his house for a conversation at around 9:50 a.m. Liu Hongge arrived at Liang Xiao's house. They sat and talked, but as the conversation progressed, Liu Hongge became increasingly emotional. She expressed that their relationship was constantly criticized by others and that she could no longer endure this clandestine life. She hoped Liang Xiao would join her in returning to China to build their careers together. However, having grown up in Singapore with a happy family and a high-paying job, Liang Xiao naturally refused her proposal. Both of them felt stuck, and Li Hongge became disheartened. Eventually, she suggested, if that's the case, let's die together so we can be together forever. Seeing Liang Xiao's hesitation, she added, "If you're afraid, let me go first, but you must promise to follow me." Liang Xiao agreed, then he took a bath towel and wrapped it around Lu Hong's neck. They were sitting face to face, which made strangling much harder compared to doing it from behind, so it took longer. After about 20 minutes of strangling, Lu Hong's face started to turn from red to purple and then to black. She eventually suffocated and collapsed onto the bed, seeing her distorted face in death. Ling Xiao felt disgusted, abandoning his suicide plan, and began thinking about how to dispose of Liu Hong's body without being detected. Ling Shu's son and youngest daughter were due to come home from school at 6 p.m., so he had to clean up the scene. Before then, he dragged Lu Hong into the bathroom and used a kitchen knife and hammer to dismember her body. During the process, internal organs fell out, which he casually tossed into the toilet and flushed. At that moment, a drop of blood splattered onto the basin of the toilet, which he failed to notice. Liang Xiao cut the body into 7 parts, cleaned them, then wrapped them in plastic bags and newspaper before placing them in cartons. Afterward, he began cleaning the bathroom and washed off the blood from himself. Once the initial cleanup was done, he proceeded to dispose of the body parts. First, Ling Xiao rode his bicycle to dispose of the feet, shoes, and clothing in a roadside trash bin. Then he took the train to the Singapore River to dispose of the head and calves. Finally, he went to the Kallang River near his home to dispose of the torso around 5 p.m. Liang Xiao returned home and began a second round of cleaning the crime scene. This time he cleaned more thoroughly, ensuring all visible stains were removed. He washed the bed linens in the washing machine. The bloodstains on the kitchen knife were painstakingly removed using a sharpening stone. After completing everything, Ling Xiao changed his clothes and went to work at the electronics factory. On his way, he passed by Ango KRT station and discarded Lu Hong's handbag and personal items in a nearby trash bin. Wang Xiao stated that after dismembering and disposing of the body, he continued to work as usual. Despite knowing he had made a grave mistake, he tried to remain calm and reminded himself not to panic at 7:30 p.m. On the day of the incident during the factory roll call, Liang Xiao even deliberately asked a colleague to call Liu Hongge and inquire why she was not at work. The police did not fully believe Liang Zia's statements. However, based on the existing evidence, they could only prove that he committed the murder without being able to determine his motive. If the case were tried according to his confession, it would be classified as manslaughter, resulting in a much lighter sentence to uncover the truth and seek justice for the victim. The police needed to gather new evidence. They quickly focused their efforts in 2 directions, continuing to search for the remaining body parts of Liu Hongge and conducting interviews to collect additional witness statements. The search for the remaining body parts faced many challenges. According to Leng Zia's testimony, he had disposed of Liu Hong's head and calves in the Singapore River. Therefore, the police deployed a special task force to search along the riverbank, but still could not find the remaining body parts. At this point, the lead investigator had a thought. Perhaps the cartons had drifted ashore and were collected as trash. He then found out that there was a company nearby responsible for cleaning the canals, and they collected waste every 2 days to transport it to a ship at several kilometers away. When the police arrived, they discovered that the waste had already been sent to the Nam Tanong Pagar incineration plant. For disposal, the police immediately contacted the incineration plant to halt operations and rushed to the scene. In front of the police were towering piles of trash, making the search for the remaining body parts a significant challenge. They searched through the foul-smelling garbage late into the night, meticulously examining every suspicious piece of waste. After a prolonged search, they finally found the decomposing calves and head. Upon examination, the police confirmed that these body parts belonged to Liu Hong. In the remaining leg, they found a metal fragment that matched the chip on the kitchen knife. However, even with this evidence, the police could not entirely discredit Liang Zia's testimony. This was because there were no clear bruises on LH's neck typically. Strangulation with a rope leaves distinct marks on the neck, but if a soft towel is used, it might not leave visible bruises. Additionally, there were no defensive wounds on the victim's body. The forensic doctor conducted tests for alcohol and drugs on Liu Hong's body, and both results were negative. This indicated that the victim was fully conscious and did not resist during the strangulation. Could it be, as Liang Xiao claimed, that Luang Mei willingly allowed him to strangle her on this matter? The doctor provided an opinion. When strangling while facing each other, the towel would need to be crossed at the throat, and the leverage would be much weaker compared to strangling from behind. Even if the victim were willing, a natural reflex would still cause a defensive reaction. The lack of marks suggests that the event was sudden or unexpected during the investigation and interviews. The image of Liu Hong that the police gathered was entirely different from Liang Xia's descriptions. Before coming to Singapore, Liu Hong had studied English at a well-known university in her province. After arriving in Singapore, she was diligent, working to earn money while continuing her studies. On May 20th, 2003, she enrolled in an English language training center. By the time of the incident, she had paid over 1,000 Singapore dollars in tuition fees over 2 years. The head of the training center reported that on June 14th, Liu Hong had inquired about the schedule and arrangements for upcoming courses. Her sister Liu Hongwei also mentioned that on the same day, Liu Hongwei had called her, expressing confidence in passing her upcoming English exam. Given Li Hong's optimistic and forward-looking attitude, it seemed unlikely that she would want to commit suicide. Furthermore, she had always wanted to stay in Singapore, so why would she suggest to Liang Xiao that they return to China to pursue their careers? If it wasn't a mutual suicide pact, then what was Liang Xiao's real motive on this point? There was a discrepancy between rumors and the police's perspective. The rumor suggested that Liu Hong's death was the result of a failed marriage proposal, making it a crime of passion. In contrast, the police believed that Liang Xiao killed her for financial reasons on March 27, 2014. Liu Hongwei and her sister visited a matchmaking agency in Singapore to find potential dates. The matchmaker described Liu Hongwei as having a gentle personality and graceful manners, and she hoped to find an educated man with good character. To marry, the agency introduced her to 5 candidates, among whom she showed interest in a civil servant and a manager. However, these matches did not succeed during her time working at the factory. It is likely that Liang Xia's mature and calm demeanor attracted Liu Hongwei. Additionally, working together daily made it easier for their relationship to develop quickly. By June of that same year, they officially began their romantic relationship. During this period, Li Hong's intention to continue working and developing her career in Singapore remained unchanged, according to a colleague in January 2005. Liu Hongmei pressured Liang Xiao to marry her, and he even accompanied her to look for a rental home on April 24, 2005. Liu Hongwei, Liu Hong's sister, registered her marriage with a Singaporean man and planned to hold the wedding in September of that year. Her future brother-in-law mentioned that he had a vacant house, so her sister invited Liu Hongwei to stay with them and even asked her to be the maid of honor at her wedding. Former manager Fu Ruqing stated that Liu Hong always admired her sister and hoped to follow in her footsteps, marrying a Singaporean man and building a family together. However, given Liang Xiao's circumstances, he clearly could not fulfill Liu Hong's desires. During that time, she was often uncertain about whether she should break up with him, especially since a young man seemed to be pursuing her. Rumors spread that Liu Hongwei had pressured Liang Xiao to marry her when he refused. She proposed breaking up, and Liang Xiao, unable to accept this, allegedly killed her, however, shortly before the incident. Liu Hongwei reported to the police that her bank card had been used without authorization. When the police checked the ATM surveillance footage, although the person withdrawing the money was wearing a baseball cap, they quickly recognized him as Liang Xiao. Regarding this, Liang Xiao claimed it was just a prank. On the afternoon of the 13th, the two of them had gone to a hotel. He took Liu Hong's bank card while she was showering. Knowing her PIN, he withdrew over $2,000 from her card after they checked out that day. However, he claimed that he returned the card and the money to her the very next day, but these lies were quickly exposed. The police did not find the returned cash at Liu Hong's home. Furthermore, if he had indeed returned the money, Liu Hong would not have needed to report it to the police. Faced with this compelling evidence, Liang Xiao could only admit that on the 14th, upon hearing Liu Hongge say she had reported him to the police, he feared being caught for stealing the money. He then arranged for Liu Hongge to come to his house the next morning, saying he would accompany her to the police station. Liang Xiao intended to the money and confess his wrongdoing, but when confronted with Li Hongge, he couldn't bring himself to do it. If the truth were eventually discovered, his extramarital affair would become known to his family and friends. This would lead to him losing his job and destroying his reputation. Thus, Liang Xiao conceived a sinister plan to kill Liu Hongge to cover everything up. He deliberately used provocative words to agitate Liu Hongge, and when she became upset, he suggested the idea of a suicide pact naively. Liu Hongge agreed on May 3, 2006. Liang Xiao's case was officially brought to trial. The prosecution charged him with premeditated murder, but he steadfastly maintained that they had agreed to commit suicide together. He argued that if he had intended to harm Liu Hongge, he would have sustained injuries during the struggle. However, the absence of such injuries, he claimed, proved that she was entirely willing. In response to this stubbornness, the police argued that just because the victim had no defensive wounds did not mean she was willing. It was highly possible that the significant strength disparity prevented her from resisting the judge, then asked Liang Xiao to demonstrate how he used the towel to strangle the victim. During this reenactment, he even revealed a bizarre smile on May 19, 2006. The Singapore High Court ruled that Li Hongge had no intention of committing suicide and that her death was entirely caused by Liang Xiao. Therefore, the court sentenced Liang Xiao to death. He felt unjustly treated and appealed, but all appeals were subsequently rejected. Finally, on October 30, 2007, he was executed for his crime. The Kowloon River murder case was closed, but it left behind many painful lessons. It revealed that beneath seemingly normal appearances, people can harbor frightening dark sides. Luong's story reminds us to be cautious in our relationships, especially when far from home. This case shows that justice was ultimately served, but the price was the life of a young, ambitious woman. Story 2, the case takes us to the vast and prosperous land of Australia, a place where many people around the world dream of settling. A wealthy Chinese couple was living happily there, but an unexpected turn of events occurred while the husband was temporarily back in China. The wife and her mother were suddenly attacked, leading to a murder right below their apartment. This tragic incident turned into a complex case for the police forces of both countries on September 30, 2010 at 7:30 p.m. A 27-year-old Chinese woman named Dan Sun was driving back to her apartment in the Balga area of Perth. Her 53-year-old mother, Jishu and Kong, was also in the car. Dan's son was on her way to pick up her daughter, who was playing at her grandmother's house. As she parked, she noticed a car blocking her from the front and another car approaching from behind. Blocking her exit, finding this strange, Dan's son asked her mother to step out and see what was going on. As soon as Jishu and Kong got out of the car, a strong, dark-skinned man with long hair jumped out of the front car armed with a spear gun. He fired at her, but she instinctively dodged the shot, causing the spear to lodge in a neighbor's apartment. After missing his target, the attacker immediately grabbed a hammer from his car and charged at Jishu and Kong, repeatedly striking her on the head, severely injured and unconscious. She fell to the ground, the assailant, then went to the driver's seat, smashed the car window with the hammer, opened the door, and repeatedly stabbed Dan's son. He then quickly drove away after neighbors reported to the police authorities. Arrived at the scene to find Dan's son deceased in the driver's seat, her mother, Jishu and Kong, was lying on the ground next to the car. Unconscious from severe head injuries inflicted by a hammer, medical personnel immediately transported her to the hospital for emergency care. Due to the secluded location of Dan's son's apartment, there was limited surveillance in the area. Only a neighbor's camera captured footage of a suspicious vehicle. Investigations revealed that a witness had seen a white sedan parked across from the victim's house for about 2 hours. When Dan's son and her mother drove home, the sedan quickly started and blocked their car. Another vehicle, a gray two-seater Mercedes-Benz CLK sports car, stopped in front of Dan's son's car. The witness also saw the perpetrator from the side but could not identify them as they were disguised upon reviewing the surveillance footage. Police identified the owner of the white sedan at the crime scene as Nua Xiao Dan's son's estranged husband. Further investigation revealed that Dan's son and Nu Oye were in the process of divorcing, and current separated police immediately searched Nu Oye's residence and discovered a spear gun matching the witness's description. Consequently, he became the prime suspect. However, just as the police were preparing to issue a warrant, Nu Oye's immigration records showed that he had returned to his home country 2 weeks prior, providing him with a solid alibi. This development left the police astounded. Could the real perpetrator be someone else? The police shifted their investigation to Dan's son's social relationship. Sheisho. The findings revealed that her social circle was very small. Apart from running her nail salon and attending English classes, she did not have any conflicts with anyone in light of this. The police refocused their investigation on her husband, Nu Siu. Despite his alibi, could Nuya have hired a hitman at the age of 30? Nuya hailed from Liaoning. His father was the head of logistics at a university in Ling. His uncle was a standing committee member of the Ling Provincial Party Committee, and his mother, Song Tibi, owned a construction company. This made his family both wealthy and influential. Locally, Nua was a true playboy, having grown up in luxury. His father and Dan's son's father were colleagues, which facilitated their marriage after obtaining Australian citizenship. Nuya lived comfortably. He enjoyed diving and spearfishing. Nua owned 3 properties worth over 10 million yuan, approximately 1.4 million US, and had a Mercedes-Benz convertible. Additionally, he ran 2 import-export companies in Australia. However, his official job in Australia was as a part-time security guard, and he frequently patrolled the community with his hunting dog. Through the investigation, police discovered that Nua was suspected of renting a house in the northeastern area of Perth. He was running a front for a massage parlor which actually provided adult services with Asian women. Nu Oye frequently visited this place and was close friends with the manager after the incident. The manager told the police Noya is a good person and his wife Dan's son is also a good friend of mine. In April 2008, Nua and Dan's son held their wedding at the Perth International Exhibition Centre. Despite Dan's son being Nu Aya's second wife, the couple enjoyed a sweet period together. Neighbors often saw them walking their dog and driving their sports car around. Although Dan's son's family background was not as affluent as Nua Xiao's, it was still quite respectable. Growing up in wealth, both Nuya and Dan's son had somewhat selfish personalities over time. Living together, their flaws began to surface, and they often quarreled over trivial matters after their daughter was born. Their disagreements escalated due to differing parenting views. During this period, Noah's mother song, TB, naturally cited. With her son, Dan's son, having been spoiled from a young age, could not tolerate grievances. Her assertive nature often displeased her mother-in-law. The strength relationship between Dan's son and Song TB, along with the marital discord, led to frequent conflicts on one occasion. Dan's son and Song TB even had a physical altercation over child-rearing issues. When Nuya learned about this, he became increasingly resentful of Dan. Sunday in April 2010, Dan's son filed for divorce in the Perth court. Following her request, the court froze Nu Oye's assets in Australia as per the legal requirements until the divorce and asset division were finalized shortly after Dan's son moved out of their mansion with her daughter and rented an apartment in the Balga area a few days later. On her lawyer's advice, Dan's son began investigating Nuazia's misconduct during their marriage, hoping to secure custody of their daughter and a larger share of the assets. Somehow, Nua became aware that Dan's son was gathering evidence against him. This struck a nerve as he was fully aware of his own dubious activities. If things took a turn for the worse, he risked losing not only his wife and child, but also most of his family's assets and custody rights. This intensified his resentment toward Dan Sunday. However, it's important not to jump to conclusions and assume that Nua Xiao was the perpetrator of the crime, with the continuous turmoil and intense conflicts over the divorce. Dan's son might have sensed something was wrong. To reduce the tension, she decided to take her daughter back to her home country. Temporarily, unexpectedly, One day, her young daughter was kidnapped by a stranger from their neighborhood. Dan Sun was devastated and extremely distraught. On her family's advice, she sought help from the Australian Embassy and the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Eventually, the investigation revealed that her daughter had been taken back to Perth and was staying with her mother-in-law. Dan Sun immediately bought a ticket and flew back to Australia to reunite with her daughter. Considering these facts, the Perth police wondered if New Oye's family already having acted irrationally over custody disputes could have gone further and committed murder. The police continued their investigation and discovered that on September 24, 2010, New AA had posted a job advertisement in a Chinese-language newspaper in Sydney. The ad was seeking a driver to travel across Australia from Sydney to Perth with a generous compensation. Strangely, immigration records showed that Nua had been in China visiting relatives since September 10th. Hiring a driver in Sydney while being in China seemed illogical. Following this lead, the police began investigating along the highway from Sydney to Perth. Based on the ad's information, this route spans approximately 4,000 kilometers, nearly crossing the entire country. Even driving nonstop, the journey would take about 2 days upon reviewing reports of unusual vehicle sightings. In September, investigators discovered a peculiar photo. The records noted that on the night of September 30th, just hours after the murder police patrolling the Nuller Plain had captured image, the Nuller Plain bordering South Australia and Western Australia is a barren, arid region with sparse population. Therefore, anyone driving through this area would need to carry ample food and water. The police discovered that this vehicle had crossed the Nuller Plain twice within 1 week. This aroused suspicion, prompting the patrol officers to stop and inspect the car. Under the dim lights, they found 2 stern-faced Asian men inside. After questioning them and verifying their identities, they determined the 2 had an employer-employee relationship, with the passenger being a man named Yumu. Although the inspection revealed nothing unusual, the police took a photo and recorded the encounter for safety. This very photo would later help unveil the horrifying truth behind the case. Upon careful comparison, the police noted that Yumu bore a striking resemblance to Dan Sun's husband, Nua Xiao, confirming they were the same person. Immigration records showed that he entered Australia on September the 23rd, 2010, and left on October 3rd, which coincided with the timeline of the murder through the collaborative efforts of Chinese and Australian police. It was discovered that the man accompanying New Oye was his friend, who had served as his best man at his wedding. The 2 men looked remarkably similar in their identification photos. With this information, the police were able to piece together the entire case. The true perpetrator was none other than the man Dan Sun had loved and trusted with her life. New Noah, a truly ruthless husband, had meticulously planned and executed a scheme to achieve his goal, something few could accomplish. Now let's recount Nuaya's criminal actions in chronological order. On September 10th, 2010, Nuaya used his Australian passport to travel back to China in Shenyang. He contacted his close friend Yumu, who bore a striking resemblance to him, and borrowed his passport. On September 23rd, Nua used Yu's passport to leave China and fly to Sydney, Australia the next day. On September 24th, he placed an advertisement seeking a driver to travel from Sydney to Perth. On September 28th, Nua arrived in Perth and prepared the necessary tools for his crime, including a spear gun, a hammer, a knife, and other implements using his assumed identity. He purchased a used white car on the final day. September 30th, Nua disguised himself armed with the weapons and waited outside the house his wife had rented at around 7:30 p.m. That evening, he committed the murder, abandoned the purchased car, and joined the hired driver for the return trip to Sydney that same night. After completing everything on October 3rd, Nua used Yu's passport to board a flight back to China. At this point, he believed his perfect crime had been executed flawlessly, if not for the diligent traffic officer who unwittingly took that crucial photo. There's no telling when the case of Dan Sun and Jishan Kong would have been solved. Additionally, on the day of the crime, another surprising detail was recorded. Nuzia's mother, Song Tia Bei, had picked up her granddaughter and brought her home when questioned by the police. Song Tia Bei stated, "My son left Perth on September 11th and never returned. He has been in China for over 2 weeks." The last time we spoke was at the end of September when Noah called me. Song Tia Bei also revealed that during the time she was caring for her granddaughter, she never left the house and no one visited. However, the police examined a computer at Tia B's home and discovered that Nuia had logged into a game account 2 days before the crime. Additionally, early on the morning of September the 29th, surveillance cameras near the mansion captured images of New Oye. This confirmed to the police that after arriving in Perth on September 28th, Nua had been hiding at his mother's house. The disturbing fact is that on the day of the murder Song, Tia Bei not only took her granddaughter away but also lied to protect Son in 2016, 6 years after the crime. Song Tia Bei was arrested at Perth Airport for harboring a criminal and providing false information to the police, although Australian police confirmed that Nua was the perpetrator of the murder of Dan's son and her mother. Due to the absence of an extradition treaty between China and Australia, the Australian authorities could not directly arrest Nua through the efforts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Interpol. Chinese police arrested Nua in April 2012 for the crime of using someone else's passport to leave the country until his arrest. Nuia had been living a luxurious life in China after murdering his wife. He quickly found a new girlfriend in Shenyang, and the two were inseparable, even traveling together in Southeast Asia after Niwa appeared in court. Chinese police located this woman when identifying the photos used as evidence. She unexpectedly exposed Nuazia's vile and shameless behavior. She told the police that she had worked for New Oye's company after they started dating. She soon became pregnant. Initially, New Oye and his family were overjoyed, but she later suffered a miscarriage. Following this incident, her boyfriend's family's attitude changed drastically on the very afternoon of her miscarriage. They demanded that she return to work immediately, dismissing her condition as insignificant and threatening to fire her. If she did not comply, this naive woman had also lent Nua 20,000 yuan, which he promised to repay. However, after his arrest, his family outright refused to acknowledge the debt. The most tragic part was that since New Oye's arrest, numerous women had approached her accusing her of having seduced him. Ultimately, she was forced to flee and live far away. Additionally, Yumu, the close friend who lent Nuia his passport, tried to inquire about the situation. After the crime occurred, only to be berated by Nuazia's family, they accused him of implicating himself by showing concern. In the early stages of his arrest, Nuia, when interrogated by the police, did not mention the crime but repeatedly talked about his two unhappy marriages. Just 1 year after marrying Dan's son, the couple began to have conflicts exacerbated by interference from both sets of parents. When Dan's son filed for divorce in 2010, Nua saw it as an escape. Unlike his previous quick divorce, Dan's son was gathering evidence of his wrongdoing. Nuja was extremely angry, not only because he might lose custody of his child and most of his assets, but more importantly because it made him feel an unprecedented sense of failure and humiliation. Consequently, Nua resolved to deal with the issue decisively in his own way, in a peculiar turn of events while in custody. Nua requested that his family send him a Bible to show repentance, but they instead sent him how the steel was tempered. Their intention to appeal by any means necessary was blatantly clear. Speaking of this, it's clear that Noah's brutal behavior cannot be separated from his family's influence. They valued money, were selfish, looked down on women, were harsh with others, and lenient with themselves. Growing up in such a dysfunctional family, it's not surprising that New Oye's actions turned out this way. Finally, in January 2016, after 5 years of joint investigation by Chinese and Australian police, New Oye confessed in a Shanghai court. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for premeditated murder. At that moment, Dan's son's father, Sun Jiayu, expressed relief, believing that Nua had received the punishment he deserved. Although there was no extradition treaty in place, China had the right to prosecute. Since the victim was a Chinese citizen, New Oye probably never anticipated that the assets he tried so hard to retain would be auctioned off by the Australian government. According to the law, the proceeds were overseen by a charity organization to establish a fund. This fund was set up to support Dan's son and New Aa's daughter. Not long after, the girl was adopted by a police couple appointed by the government. Later, this couple even took the girl back to Shenyang to visit her Bedouin grandparents. Currently, Danson's daughter is still living with this police couple in Australia. They have opened a new chapter in her life, looking toward a brighter future. Dear viewers in life, there is a saying when romance ends, kindness should prevail. Perhaps things wouldn't have come to this if New Oye had known how to let go and stop. It was his greed and ambition that led him to lose everything he valued. More than love, his material possessions and honor, now he has paid a very high price. Story 3 on July 15, 2011. Mr. Ding Zhong gave his first media interview in Northampton, UK. He had just flown in from the US to attend the memorial service for his brother Ding, speaking about the tragic fate of his brother's family of 4. Mr. Ding Zhong tried to contain his inner rage and expressed indignation towards the perpetrator Duan Tong. So, who is Duan Tong and why did he commit such a brutal crime? Northampton is the third largest town in the UK with a population of around 250,000. It is located 78 kilometers from Birmingham, 96 kilometers from London, and is one of London's significant satellite towns. The main character, Ding Jing, and his family also resided here. Ding Jeffing was born on May 26, 1964. His wife Sue was born on April 4, 1964. They were both from Hongju and classmates in the chemistry department at university. In the early 1990s, the trend of studying abroad and immigrating overseas began to gain popularity in China. This young couple joined the trend and chose the UK as their destination for studying abroad. Later, Ding Jeffing went abroad for further studies and obtained a PhD in chemistry in the UK shortly after his wife also earned a master's degree. There, with their high educational qualifications and extensive work experience, they successfully settled in the UK. During this time in 1993, they welcomed their first daughter, Ding Exon, 6 years later. In 1999, they had their second daughter, Ding Huan, in the same year. Tui, with her keen business sense, opened an herbal medicine store in the small town of Roberton in Northampton, naming it Herb Magic Ding Ging, and his wife managed the store together for about a year, but the business was not very successful. The main reason was that both of them had studied chemistry and were not professional traditional Chinese medicine doctors, so they lacked experience in pharmacology and herbal medicine preparation. Therefore, they invited a few traditional Chinese medicine doctors to collaborate, but the business still did not improve. At this point, the arrival of Duan Tong and his wife Qin Zhong brought new life to their herbal medicine store. Duan Tong was born on December 2, 1958 in Hunan Province. He and his wife Chun Zhan both graduated from the Hunan Traditional Chinese Medicine Institute, now Hunan University of Chinese Medicine, as formerly trained traditional Chinese medicine doctors. Duan Tong and his wife had worked for many years in China, accumulating substantial experience in traditional medicine. In search of better opportunities in 1998, Duan Tong, along with his wife and young son, moved to the UK on a work visa there. They worked at the Dr. Herb's chain of stores under Tanshan Pharmaceuticals. By early 2000, through mutual friends, Sua met the traditional Chinese medicine doctor Qin Han. After a few meetings, the relationship between the two families grew closer. Soon after, Ding Jing and Sua decided to invite Duan Tong to work at their herbal medicine store. This was a mutually beneficial decision for both families. The Ding family gained an experienced traditional Chinese medicine doctor as a partner who could help with quality control procurement and preparation of herbal medicines, which was crucial for the store. In return, Duan Tong not only secured the opportunity to apply for permanent residency in the UK, but also earned more money. Transitioning from an employee to a partner with partial management rights of the store after discussions on February 24th. 2000, Herb Magic changed its ownership structure. Initially, Ding Jing and Sua each held 50% of the shares, but now Sua would hold 99% of the shares, and Duan Tong would hold 1%. Regarding the reason why Duan Tong held only 1% of the shares, Sua explained that due to his work visa, he was legally permitted to work only as a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. If he were to become a shareholder, his ownership could not exceed 1%. According to the law, however, the 1% was merely symbolic. Sua and Duan Tong had agreed to split the profits equally, with Duan Tong receiving 50%. Yet these were only verbal agreements which would later become the source of significant conflicts in reality. Since Duantong began working at Sua's herbal medicine store, Herb Magic saw a substantial increase in sales. His extensive knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine and expertise in herbal preparation quickly earned the trust of customers. At this time, the number of Chinese students and immigrants in the UK was rising, leading to increased demand for herbal medicine thanks to Ditong's contributions. Herb Magic became highly successful within a few short months. Recognizing the immense business potential in 2001, Sua opened 2 more branches in Coventry, and Cheltenham, owning 3 herbal medicine stores, made her a well-known figure in the Chinese community and one of the earliest successful herbal medicine store owners. However, business partnerships are never easy. Despite the outward success of the 3 branches over time, conflicts between Duantong and Sua grew and became increasingly difficult to resolve. According to Duantong's family, Sua gradually started concealing financial reports and withholding information from Duantong. Therefore, Dan Tong never knew exactly how much money the herbal store was making. He felt that the business was doing well, but the amount he received in Des de Yusiuasal. Profit sharing was not significant. More importantly, according to their original agreement, Tua and Duantong were supposed to split the profits equally, but Tua often delayed payments, causing him great frustration. On the other hand, according to Tua's family, she was busy with other outside work and couldn't manage the store's finances daily. As a result, Duantong took advantage of her absence to secretly take some cash from the store. Consequently, Sua believed that Duantong was stealing money from the store and thought that if he had already taken some cash, she shouldn't split the profits equally anymore. In 2001, the issue of Dan and Tong taking money led them to involve the police. Duantong admitted to taking cash from the store, but maintained that as a shareholder and one of the store's owners, it was normal for him to do so. The police viewed this as a financial dispute and did not file a report advising them to resolve the matter in court. If they couldn't reconcile eventually under police mediation, Sua and Duantong reached an agreement. Sua decided not to pursue the cash Duantong had taken, but from that point on, the 2 families were completely arraying. Sua, being very astute, realized she could no longer cooperate with Duantong. On July 25, 2001, she partnered with an English friend named Paul Delaney to open another herbal medicine store named Herbs for Health. Dan Tong was not to be outdone after obtaining permanent residency in the UK. In 2002, he opened his own herbal medicine store in April 2002, naming it Jade Herbs. This marked the official end of his partnership with Tua. However, within a few years, he closed Jade Herbs. Duantong then founded Fukong Pharmaceuticals and opened another herbal medicine store named Natural Health at the Pavilion Shopping Center in Birmingham in November 2002. Duantong and his wife spent $100,000 to purchase their first home in Coventry. Meanwhile, Ding Ging and Sua diversified their business ventures. Starting in 2004, Ding Jeffing began working as a senior lecturer in the Department of Chemistry and Environmental Science at Manchester Metropolitan University. Sua, in addition to managing the herbal medicine store, also worked as a Chinese language teacher at Caroline Chisholm School, where their youngest daughter, Ding Hanan, was a student. Although everyone seemed to have moved on with their lives, Duantong persisted in reclaiming the money Tua had owed him after years of unsuccessful negotiations and refusals from the Ding family. Duantong decided in 2007 to take Ding Jing's family to court. He demanded that Sua pay the amount owed to him from 2000 to 2002, as he had only received a small portion of the initially agreed-upon sum. After receiving the court summons, Sua began transferring her assets to avoid a judgment by putting all her herbal medicine stores up for sale during the trial. Seeing a high possibility of losing, Sua attempted to transfer her assets to others. Just days before the court ruling on November 12, 2007, the local court ruled against Sua, ordering her to pay $30,000 in attorney fees to Duantong. As for the profits from the herbal medicine stores, the judge indicated that a separate trial would be held to address this issue. Sua subsequently agreed to comply with the court's ruling and paid over $30,000 in attorney fees. However, 6 months later, on May 7th, 2008, the judge determined that Sua had only paid about 40% of what Duan Tong was entitled to during their partnership ruling, that Sua must pay the remaining 60%, which amounted to approximately $30,000. The judge also granted Dan Tong's lawyer's request to freeze Tua's assets to ensure payment, however. Before Duan Tong could celebrate the court's decision, Sua demonstrated her cunning. The very next day at 9 a.m. on May 8th, Tua successfully sold the house where her family had lived for 6 years on the same day she sold the house Sua filed for bankruptcy. Importantly, although the judge's ruling was made on May 7th, the legal documentation required 1 to 2 days for judicial registration to take effect. As a result, Sua's house sale occurred faster than the judicial registration process. Sua sold the house on May 8th, while the judicial registration was completed on May 9th. Therefore, legally, by the time the asset freeze order in the judgment took effect, Tua was already in bankruptcy according to UK law. If Tua was bankrupt, she would no longer be required to pay the $30 million in profits to Duan Tong, although Tua's actions were quite cunning. Legally, she committed no crime upon learning this outcome. Duan Tong had no choice but to accept it. Bitterly, the matter should have ended here, despite not recovering the $30,000 owed to him. Duan Tong didn't have to pay legal fees, won the lawsuit, preserved his dignity, and regained a sense of justice. However, a few months later, Duan Tong discovered that Sua and Ding Ging's family of 4 were still living in the old house, in theory. Wasn't that house sold? After the ruling, he then quickly investigated this matter thoroughly, according to real estate sale records. Tua and Ding Jeffing purchased their house on May 8, 2002 for $250,000. However, 6 years later, on the day of the judgment, May 8, 2008, they sold it for the much lower price of $210,000. Although Duan Tong was not in the real estate business, he knew this was highly suspicious. According to market evaluations, Tua's house should have been worth around $270,000. This means Tua sold the house for 20% below its market value on the day of the judgment. More importantly, the buyer of the house was none other than Tua's English business partner. After uncovering all these details, Duan Tong felt he had been deceived by Tua. It was clear that the house sale was a scheme by Tua to transfer assets before filing for bankruptcy. After consulting with his lawyer, Duan Tong filed another lawsuit taking both Tua and Paul Delaney to court. He accused them of conducting an illegal transaction at an obviously unreasonable price within a short period, essentially aiming to transfer assets. This lawsuit lasted for 2 years during this time to prepare for the worst possible outcome. Duan Tong also started transferring assets held in his name on January 6, 2010. He resigned as director of Fuck Hang Pharmaceuticals and transferred ownership of the company to his son, while he and his wife retained only shares in the company. Fortunately, in May 2010, after intense courtroom debates, Duan Tong won the lawsuit. Once again, the judge ruled that the real estate transaction between Sua and Paul Delaney was void. However, Sua and Delaney did not accept this verdict and appealed to the High Court. Despite winning the case, Duan Tong faced increasing pressure from the appeal. In a media interview, his wife revealed that to counter Tua Delaney's appeal, Duan Tong had to gather various documents, contact lawyers, and devote all his energy to the case. By the end of 2010, the High Court concluded that although the sale price of the house between Sua and Delaney was clearly below market value, and the transaction was done in a short period which seemed unreasonable, there was an important clause in the transaction. Paul Delaney had agreed to lease the house back to Tua for 21 years. In other words, Delaney had foregone part of his benefits to secure a lower purchase price. Therefore, the High Court ruled that the transaction did not violate principles of fairness and was legally valid, resulting in Duan Tong losing the case by Monday morning. May 1st, there was still no news about Duan Tong the West. Midlands Police Department sent officers to Tua's house to inquire if they knew anything about Duan Tong's whereabouts. After knocking on the door for a while with no response, the officers assumed no one was home and left a card in the mailbox requesting Tua to contact the police as soon as possible. Then left, however, around 6 p.m. That same day, the situation became more complicated. A man named Jason Horley called the police station reporting that he was a neighbor of Tua's family and that something was wrong. He urged the police to come immediately. Jason explained that in the afternoon, an elderly Indian woman who had been friends with the Tua family since 2002 came to his door. She mentioned that she hadn't seen any activity at Sua's house for several days, on April 29th, the day of the royal wedding. Their neighborhood had hosted many community events. However, Sua's daughters, 18-year-old Ding Exan and 12-year-old Ding Huan, who usually love participating in community activities, were not seen. Additionally, the curtains at Sua's house had been drawn all weekend with no one going in or out, which was highly unusual after hearing the elderly woman's account. Jason accompanied her to Tua's house when no one answered the front door. He went around to the back through the garden, through the kitchen window and the curtains. Jason saw a dark brown stain on the floor. Upon closer inspection, he noticed a pair of human legs. Terrified, he rushed back home and called the police to better understand the crime scene. Let's take a look at the 3D model created by the police. Sua's family home is a two-story house with a detached garage and a pathway leading to the backyard. The second floor has 4 rooms, the master bedroom in the bottom left corner, 2 bedrooms for the daughters, and a small sitting room. The first floor includes the living room, dining room, and kitchen with a back door from the kitchen opening to the backyard. The first officers on the scene were Officer John Campbell and Chinese officer Wang Qingyi. Upon arrival, Officer Campbell broke through the back door to enter the house. He found Sua in her pajamas slumped beside the kitchen. Moving further inside, he saw Ding Jeffing lying collapsed beneath the fireplace place along the wall. Both had been stabbed multiple times and their bodies were rigid. Blood splattered the walls, floor, and curtains based on the coagulated state of the blood. The police could determine they had been dead for some time while Officer Campbell was inspecting the 2 victims on the first floor. Officer Wang Qingyi went up to the second floor with his gun drawn. He used his baton to open the door to the sitting room in the corner, seeing the 2 children. He shouted, "Police, stay still," but quickly realized both children were already dead. Officer Wang Qingyi recounted that he first saw a small child curled up lying on her side on the bed, curled into a ball with her back against the headboard. This was Ding Huan, the family's younger daughter. The elder daughter, Ding Sen, was found kneeling beside the bed, appearing to be in a praying position. The carpet and bed were covered in dried blood. The forensic report later concluded that Ding Ging had been stabbed 23 times with numerous defensive wounds on his arms, indicating he had fought back fiercely. In contrast, Ku had been stabbed 13 times and had no defensive wounds, suggesting that the first stab may have incapacitated her in the upstairs sitting room. The elder daughter, Ding Exan, had been stabbed 10 times, including a stab through her hand, indicating she had tried to defend herself or plead with the attacker. The younger daughter, Ding Hanan, had been stabbed 4 times and had scratched marks on her arms, showing the attacker had restrained her with one hand while stabbing her with the other. The entire scene revealed the brutal and inhumane nature of the attack. On the same day, the Ding family's bodies were discovered. Duan Tong was identified by the police as the sole suspect. The police needed to find him quickly. The case, once made public, shocked the entire UK due to its barbaric and violent nature. The Northampton Police Department swiftly mobilized its top investigators to focus on this case. First, they began by meticulously reviewing surveillance footage from around Duan Tong's home, nearby train stations, bus stops, and the crime scene vicinity. Additionally, intelligence suggested that Duan Tong might be hiding in the local, but the shops and businesses in the area were uncooperative with the police investigation. One hypothesis suggested that clues about Duan Tong's disappearance might be found in London's Chinatown. However, due to cultural sensitivities, language barriers, and the need for caution, Northampton police had to conduct their search carefully. Shop owners were asked to display wanted posters of Duan Tong, but some refused. Considering it bad luck, others were reluctant to be seen cooperating with the police. As a result, only 2 shops agreed to the police request. Despite these challenges, there was a breakthrough in analyzing surveillance footage, allowing the police to almost fully reconstruct Duan Tong's movements on the day of the crime. Surveillance video showed that at 10:44 a.m. on April 29th, Duan Tong boarded a train from Coventry to the herbal medicine store in Birmingham. He was carrying his passport at 11:20 a.m. Duan Tong arrived at the herbal medicine store and stayed there for about 10 minutes. During this time, he wrote a note and placed it in the appointment book, then took a knife from the kitchen and hid it in his backpack. After preparing everything, he put on a hat, shouldered his backpack, and took a train from Birmingham to Northampton at 12:35 p.m. That same day, Duan Tong got off the train at Northampton Station. He then walked to the Greyfriars bus station and waited at Bay 19. Finally, he boarded bus number 15 at 17 p.m. before getting off the bus at 1:20 p.m. Duan Tong asked the driver for directions to the Wooten area where Tua's family lived. Perhaps fate tried to intervene as the driver gave Duan Tong incorrect directions as a result. Even though he was very close to the area, he couldn't find Sua's house. Following the driver's instructions, however, Duan Tong did not abandon his plan. He wandered around the area repeatedly asking passers-by for directions. Eventually, with their guidance, he found Sua's house around 3:15 p.m. He walked through the open garage door into the backyard, and Ding Gong, who was in the kitchen when Sua heard the commotion and rushed in. He immediately stabbed her, preventing her from fighting back. Hearing the screams of the two children upstairs, he frantically ran up and attacked the defenseless girls, according to the police investigation at 3:32 p.m. On the day of the crime, the local police received a distress call from the elder daughter Ding Sen in the 22nd call. The dispatcher could clearly hear the screams and cries of the two girls. Tragically, Ding Zan was unable to speak before the call was disconnected, sadly, after reporting Ding X's phone number and location to the police. The dispatcher misreported the address. Consequently, the police went to Collingwood Park, 3.6 kilometers south of the actual location, missing the chance to save the two girls after murdering Tua's entire family. Duan Tong did not leave in a hurry. He washed the blood off his hands and left the weapon on the kitchen counter. Perhaps due to staying up all night and being busy all day, he felt exhausted and fell asleep in Sua's house. When he woke up, it was already past 9:00 p.m. To escape Duan Tong, rummaged through the house and took a wallet along with a set of car keys. At 9:49 p.m., surveillance cameras captured Duan Tong driving the stolen Corsa at a gas station on the M1 motorway junction. 15A, he refueled, bought a banana milkshake, and purchased a map of Northampton. Duan Tong did not rush to flee because he still had one more name on his revenge list: Delaney, the person who had caused his bankruptcy, using the map. Duan Tong drove around but could not find Delaney's house, or perhaps Delaney was not home that night. Frustrated, Duan Tong gave up, drove to London, and parked the car on Venable Street. Since the area where Duan Tong parked only allowed parking on weekends and holidays, by the time the car was discovered, it had accumulated 9 parking tickets after abandoning the car on April 30th. Duan Tong spent $61 to buy a one-way bus ticket from London to Paris. A week later, on May 11th, the police finally found the abandoned car in North London. The car was actually rented by the elder daughter Ding Xan because the family car was being repaired. Unfortunately, this caused a delay in the investigation, and the police missed the opportunity to arrest Duan Tong. On May 24th, Duan Tong's image was broadcast on Crime Watch, a popular UK crime show with an audience of 3 to 5 million viewers. The police hoped that airing the case on this show would raise awareness and bring in more leads about Duan Tong's whereabouts. Despite abundant physical evidence at the crime scene and numerous clues from surveillance footage, the investigation progressed slowly a year after. After the crime occurred, with assistance from the Paris Police Northampton, police discovered that after arriving in Paris, Duan Tong moved to the port city of Alaris in southern Spain. There he purchased a one-way ticket to North Africa with Morocco as his destination, and then disappeared completely on April 29, 2012, exactly 1 year after the Ding family's death. A significant figure in the case, Delaney suddenly passed away from a stroke at the age of 65. This made the death dates of all 5 individuals involved in the case coincide on the same day. This unbelievable coincidence added even more mystery to the case. Subsequently, the Northampton police traveled to China and Spain to solicit information about the criminal. They believe that after leaving Northampton, Duan Tong went to London, where he took a bus to Paris. From there, he was thought to have traveled to Alaris in Spain, from which he could take a ferry to Tangier in Morocco 14 months after the crime. In July 2012, the case that had once shocked the UK finally saw a significant breakthrough with the help of Spanish and Moroccan police. Local media widely reported on Duan Tong's case shortly afterward. A Moroccan man called the local police, identifying himself as the foreman of a construction site in the port city of Tangier in northern Morocco. He reported that he recognized Duan Tong, the wanted criminal from the news, as the night watchman at his construction site. Upon receiving the tip, Moroccan police immediately went to the construction site to arrest Duan Tong. The chief officer responsible for the arrest recognized that this man had been detained. The previous May, at that time, Duan Tong had just arrived in Tangier and was arrested on suspicion of being an illegal immigrant. Duan Tong gave his name as Li Ming and claimed he was from Taiwan, since the UK police were unaware that Duan Tong had fled to North Africa, and the Moroccan police were unaware of the murder case in the UK. They released him after a brief interrogation, this time after arresting Duan Tong. The Moroccan police immediately informed the British police. The British police quickly traveled to Morocco and confirmed that it was indeed Duan Tong, the man they had been searching for over a year. According to the workers at the construction site, Duan Tong had been very secretive since his arrival. Not knowing the local language and lacking proper accommodations, he had to sleep on a makeshift bed at the site during his more than a year at the construction site. Duan Tong's life was extremely difficult. Despite capturing Duan Tong, there was a significant issue. There was no extradition treaty between Morocco and the UK. As a result, the two countries had to negotiate extensively. Finally, in February 2013, Duan Tong was extradited to the UK. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Duan Tong admitted to the murders, but claimed that he had been under immense psychological pressure and was mentally unstable before committing the crime, which led to his inability to control his actions. His lawyer argued that Duan Tong should be charged with manslaughter rather than murder. The mental and physical evaluations of Duan Tong extended the case by another 8 months. The trial scheduled for May was delayed due to the absence of a Chinese interpreter, causing repeated postponements until the trial finally began. In November, on November 28, 2013, Judge Julian Flo of the High Court found Duan Tong guilty of murder. The judge determined that Duan Tong had meticulously planned and executed the murders, from purchasing the knife beforehand to leaving a note for his wife and family, and then going straight to Q Gay's house in Northampton. Forensic evidence showed that when Duan Tong committed the murders, he precisely stabbed the victims in the lungs and heart, causing almost immediate death for the entire family of 4. Before the trial, Duan Tong told a psychologist that he only intended to carry the knife to reclaim his money, but Ding Jeffing not only refused but also mocked him. However, the judge was skeptical of this story and believed that even if Duan Tong was mentally agitated, it did not prevent him from meticulously planning and brutally carrying out the murders, especially by not sparing the 2 innocent children. Moreover, after the crime, he sought an opportunity to kill Delaney and then fled abroad, indicating that he was fully aware of his actions. Therefore, the judge rejected the argument for manslaughter and sentenced Duan Tong to life imprisonment with a minimum of 40 years, without parole at 54 years old. Duan Tong would have to serve until he was 94, and it is highly likely he will never leave prison. This case sparked considerable controversy over the police's effectiveness, particularly the handling of Ding X's distress call on the day of the crime, which left many people outraged following the verdict. The Independent Police Complaints Commission, IPCC, conducted a detailed investigation. Commissioner Omar Deep Somal stated that the misrecorded address cost the police precious minutes that could have saved lives. If the police had verified the address more thoroughly, they could have arrived at the correct location within minutes and potentially apprehended Duan Tong at the scene. The IPCC highlighted that the dispatcher was inadequately trained and there were no clear procedures for handling abruptly disconnected emergency calls. After the release of the Commission's report, the Northampton Police Department acknowledged that their response to the distress call was disappointing and unacceptable. They wrote a letter of apology to the victim's family, but also stated that even if the police had arrived at the correct address, the chances of saving all 4 members of Ding Ying's family were slim. Their only likely opportunity would have been to apprehend Duan Tong at the scene. Following the case, Manchester Metropolitan University, where Ding Ying worked, erected a memorial in his honor. Additionally, Sua and Ding Huan's high school planted daffodils in their memory. The most heartbreaking aspect of this case is perhaps the fate of the eldest daughter. Ding Ixan, during her high school years, she was a model student, always helping others, and an accomplished violinist at the time of the incident. Ding Ixan was 18 years old and had just finished her university entrance exams. She had received an offer from the University of Nottingham's medical school, but was waiting for her August exam results in hopes of being accepted into the University of Cambridge. Tragically, Ding Zan will never know the outcome she left behind, a promising future that will forever remain unfulfilled. Reflecting on the horrifying case of the Ding family, there is much to discuss. Sua was a patient teacher, polite to colleagues, and devoted to her husband and children, earning praise from friends, colleagues, and superiors. However, human nature is complex and cannot be easily categorized as simply good or bad. In business, Sua seemed to transform into an entirely different person, resembling an extreme utilitarian. Although she promised Pro to share profits equally with Duantong, she ultimately delayed payment when the lawsuit was underway. She transferred her assets and filed for bankruptcy at the last minute, trying every possible way to evade responsibility. While her actions were not illegal, they led to Tuga paying the ultimate price with the lives of her entire family. However, what Sua did not anticipate was that a well-educated traditional Chinese medicine doctor like Duantong would choose such an extreme and brutal path. Perhaps Tua's utilitarianism ignited the tragedy, plunging her and her family into calamity. Since the incident, many people have expressed sympathy for Duantong. They believe that before the crime, he was a good person, a genuine traditional Chinese medicine doctor who tried to resolve the issue legally. When Sua deceived him, he patiently waited for justice, but when he realized that the brink of crime. Of course, we cannot justify Duantong's actions through sympathy, especially when he directed his anger towards the two innocent daughters of the victims. Acts of violence and murder are always deserving of condemnation. Story 4, around 7:00 p.m. on February 28, 2021, in the city of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. The bitter cold of winter had set in. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and a light snowfall dotted the sky at 347 Arvin Avenue. A young woman named Jordan Romano experienced the most painful moment of her life as she was shot in the chest in a state of panic. She gritted her teeth against the pain, put her car in reverse, and sped away. However, she didn't get far before crashing into the curb and coming to a stop at this point. One hand clutched her bleeding chest wound while the other struggled to open the car door. Worse still, she realized that her legs could no longer support her. She was forced to crawl. Using her hands and knees, every movement hindered by the bone-chilling cold that made her body shiver uncontrollably. The parking lot was just a few dozen meters ahead, but for Romano it seemed infinitely far. A powerful fear and an intense will to live pushed her to keep crawling forward. She kept telling herself she had to survive, especially since she was 13 weeks pregnant. Hamilton is a city known for its heavy industry with a large industrial area. Romano's accident occurred in this industrial zone. While the area is bustling with workers during the day, it becomes almost deserted at night. When Romano managed to crawl to the roadside, she desperately waved for help. Under the dim streetlights, her consciousness began to fade. She knew she couldn't hold on much longer. Luckily, a car drove by, turned around, and headed back towards her. A woman inside the car asked. In surprise what had happened, Romano told her she had been shot and pleaded with the woman to help her get into the car and leave. The woman immediately got out to assist her and instructed her boyfriend to call the police upon receiving the report. The police quickly arrived at the scene. The caller, Annette Bride, reported that she and her boyfriend were on their way to a gas station when they noticed something on the left side of the road in the industrial area. At first it looked like an animal, but they couldn't be sure after driving a bit further. Sensing something was wrong, they turned around and found Romano crawling along the roadside. After securing the industrial area, Detective Ive M.C. Miller, who was in charge of the investigation, found Romano's black high heel on the concrete pavement of the parking lot. Not far from the shoe, there were some car fragments near the warehouse gate. The police discovered that the chain lock had been cut, suggesting an unauthorized entry into the industrial area. A green metal wall at the entrance was dented with car debris scattered on the ground, indicating where Romano had likely crashed while reversing. Following the path, the police discovered a man lying behind a building. He was on his back with his arms spread wide, surrounded by 7 9mm shell casings and 2 unused bullets. The autopsy revealed that the man had been shot 6 times, with 1 bullet hitting his left lung, causing severe blood loss. His left lung alone had lost 2.2 liters of blood, indicating that he didn't die immediately from the gunshots, but gradually from excessive bleeding. Near the body, investigators found a $5 Canadian bill and a plane ticket from Vancouver, British Columbia to Toronto. The name on the ticket was Tyler Pratt, the man lying on the ground. According to the investigation, Tyler was born on August 13, 1982, and had a complex family background. His parents divorced when he was young. His mother, who had a PhD in theology from Wagner University, opened a hair salon after the divorce, becoming a well-known bridal hairstylist and makeup artist. Perhaps due to the lack of his mother's love, Tyler became rebellious after his father remarried. Gradually going astray as he grew up to make money, he started dealing drugs. Although he had connections with many gangs in the Vancouver area, Tyler saw himself purely as a businessman focusing solely on drugs and money without ever getting involved in guns or violence over the years. Thanks to his relationships and reputation, Tyler became one of the most notorious drug dealers in the Vancouver area. Even though his transactions could reach millions of dollars in a single day, Tyler remained very cautious and only dealt in cash. He had no credit cards, no bank deposits, and didn't own any property. However, as he accumulated wealth, Tyler began considering how to launder his money to this end. Tyler founded Hard as Diamond, a company specializing in custom diamond jewelry. He also launched a premium health sea care product brand called Elite Organics. Despite these ventures, the revenue from both businesses was still limited and the cash flow was insufficient. He was eager to establish more legitimate businesses, knowing that drug dealing wasn't a sustainable way to make money and would eventually lead to trouble. The sooner he could launder his money and transition to legal businesses, the safer he would be. This desire became even stronger after the birth of his 3 children during his time as a drug dealer. Tyler married twice and had 3 children. Jordan Romano, the woman who was shot at the beginning of the story, was his girlfriend. The two had planned to marry in the near future, and Romano was 13 weeks pregnant on the day of the incident. Romano was shot in the chest, although she received help and was quickly taken to the hospital. She fell into a coma from the severity of her injuries. Before the ambulance arrived, doctors found that the bullet had lodged near her heart. Due to the significant blood loss, the baby could not be saved. Most people believe that Romano's chances of survival were very slim. Since the victim was still in critical condition, the police couldn't get a statement about what happened or who fired the shot. Therefore, the investigators had to start from the crime scene to gradually gather clues by examining the security cameras around the scene. The police discovered that at 5:05 p.m. on February 28th, 2 hours before the incident, a white Audi Q5 entered the industrial area's parking lot shortly after a white Range Rover also drove in at 5:54 p.m. The Audi Q5 left the industrial area only to return just over 10 minutes later at 6:12 p.m. The white Audi Q5 stopped at the roadside just outside the industrial area. At this point, a young woman got out of the car and walked back towards the warehouse area. A few minutes later, the same woman drove the white Range Rover out of the industrial area into the Audi. Then both vehicles quickly drove off and disappeared from the camera footage. The day after the incident on March 1st, the police gathered significant clues. Someone reported that an illegally parked vehicle was at a construction site on Audley Street in the Aobo area of Toronto. Officer McGarry of the Toronto Police Department arrived at the site upon entering the construction area. He spotted a white Range Rover parked against traffic on Audley Street. After scanning the license plate, Officer McGarry found that the vehicle was wanted and immediately contacted the Hamilton police in charge of the case. When the officers arrived at the scene, they noticed clear signs of a collision on the vehicle. Not only were the 2 front doors unable to close, but there were also bloodstains on the bumper driver's door and passenger door. Notably, there was a distinct green scratch. marked next to driver's seat matching the green metal wall of the warehouse. Additionally, investigators found Romano's blood on the dashboard steering wheel and other parts of the car since the front windshield was neither damaged nor had bullet holes. Investigators deduced that the shooter stood outside the car and fired at Romano, who was in the driver's seat. The driver's side window or door must have been open. Additionally, there was a bullet hole in the driver's seat and a 9mm bullet lodged in the driver's side door. By comparing the bullet trajectory, the police found that this bullet matched those found on the ground at the industrial area, all fired from the same gun. This indicated that the assailant had fired 3 shots at Romano in the driver's seat, but fortunately only one hit her. During a thorough search of the vehicle, investigators found Tyler's driver's license and Romano's car insurance documents. The information on these documents showed that the car was new, registered under Romano's name, and had been purchased only a few months prior. Additionally, a Gucci handbag was found inside the car. When opened, it contained some makeup items in women's clothing. A particular short-sleeved t-shirt caught the police's attention. The shirt had the number 81 printed on it, a numerical symbol used by local Hell's Angel supporters. This suggested that Romano might have connections to the criminal underworld on the same day the Range Rover was found. The police also located the Audi Q5, captured on surveillance cameras on Green Street. Not far from the crime scene, the license plates had been removed, the hood was badly damaged, and the car keys were discarded near the front passenger side wheel. Through investigating the VIN, the police discovered that the car belonged to a woman named Iris Lopez. During questioning, Iris stated that the car previously belonged to her, and her husband had removed the license plates at her request. She explained that on the afternoon of February 28th, she sold the car to a friend of her son. Iris had never met the buyer, only signed the transfer papers and left the rest to her. Son, upon examining the transfer documents, investigators identified the buyer as a man named Oliver Carafa. He was 28 years old, originally from Slovakia, but had immigrated to Canada with his family when he was young as an adult. He lived a life of petty crime, making money by stealing cars, modifying them on the black market, and repainting them for sale. The police were well acquainted with Carafa, as he had gained national notoriety in Canada in 2012 due to a car accident around 2:30 a.m. On April 3, 2012, a then 19-year-old Carafa, driving under the influence and at twice the speed limit, caused the death of his 24-year-old Chinese friend David Chang. For causing the severe accident, Carafa was sentenced to 5 years in prison and had his driver's license revoked for 15 years in 2014. However, under Canadian law, despite the 5-year sentence, Carafa only served 3 years and was released in August 2017. Unfortunately, David's life was taken, and KFA's punishment was only 3 years in 2017. Prison. After his release, he was hired at a cafe in Toronto. Outwardly, Correa seemed to have reformed, but inwardly he still harbored malicious intentions during the investigation of the Hamilton murder. The police suspected Correa as the main perpetrator, as surveillance footage showed the Audi Q5. He bought for $10,000 at 1:49 p.m. On the day of the incident, the car hadn't yet been fitted with new license plates, but just a few hours after purchasing it, Carafa drove to the crime scene and abandoned the car by the roadside, even leaving the keys behind. Why would he waste such a large sum of money? The only reasonable explanation is that Carafa bought the car with the intent to assassinate Tyler that day. While the police were focusing their investigation on Carafa, the hospital delivered good news after 3 days in a coma. Jordan Romano miraculously regained consciousness, although she lost her unborn child, and her boyfriend Romano managed to muster the strength to reveal the name of the shooter to the police. In addition to Carafa, who was still a suspect, there was another accomplice at the scene: KFA's girlfriend Lucy Lee, 25 years old and from a wealthy family. Lucy was born into a wealthy Chinese family, the eldest of 5 children and one of 3 triplet sisters. The second triplet, Caitlin, graduated from the University of Toronto and is the CEO of a tech company. The youngest triplet, Lei, attended the Stern School of Business at New York University and founded the education consulting firm Pier 1 Academy. After graduation, their upbringing can be attributed to their mother, Leia Zwei. a well-known entrepreneur in the Chinese community in Canada. Lei Hales from Hunan earned her master's degree in the 1980s and worked for the Shenzhen municipal government for 10 years. In December 1998, her family immigrated to Toronto, Canada. 2 years later, she founded Ruang International Financial Group, specializing in insurance and financial management. In interviews, Leah Zwei shared her educational philosophy and how she raised her 5 children to become independent and confident entrepreneurs. Regarding her daughter Lucy, she described her as an outstanding student at Harvard University. Although Liao Zi's educational advice sounds reasonable, the involvement of her eldest daughter Lucy, a Harvard graduate in a murder case, suggests her methods may not have been as successful as she claimed. Everything began after Lucy graduated from college and met Carafa, who had just been released from prison. Together, they formed a love story between a successful businesswoman and a rogue at the hospital. Romano, upon regaining consciousness, recounted the events to the investigators based on her remaining memories. She explained that she and her fiancé Tyler were introduced to Lucy and Carafa through a mutual friend in 2020. Carafa had heard that Tyler was a drug kingpin and knew he was eager to establish legitimate businesses to launder his dirty money. So in Tyler's presence, Carafa pretended to be a savvy investor, claiming he had many profitable legal businesses to introduce to Tyler. Initially, Tyler was skeptical of Carafa, but since KFA's girlfriend Lucy indeed came from a wealthy family and her mother was well known, Tyler gradually lowered his guard and grew closer to Carafa. Then in 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, face masks became scarce worldwide. Correa suggested that Tyler invest in a mask manufacturing plant in Europe, assuring him it would be highly profitable. Initially, Tyler invested $170,000, but after a few months, Carafa reported that the business was thriving, not only breaking even, but also generating substantial profits. Consequently, Tyler invested an additional $300,000, bringing his total investment to $470,000, according to Romano. By 2021, Carafa showed Tyler a bank statement indicating that the company's account in Prague had 1 million euros, reflecting a profit increase of at least 25 times. This wasn't just about selling masks, it was like printing money. However, problems arose when Tyler wanted to withdraw the money. Carafa explained that transferring such a large sum directly from Europe to Canada would undoubtedly attract tax authorities' attention. This could result in the bank account being frozen, the money confiscated, and even exposed. Tyler's drug trafficking operations. After consideration, Carafa proposed a new plan. He suggested that his girlfriend Lucy's family, who worked in the insurance industry, could help. They could buy life insurance policies in Europe and then cash them out in Canada. It was later discovered that these life insurance policies were fraudulent, created by Lucy and Carafa. Together, in reality, their European protective equipment company was not making any money. This company, Shogo Limited, was established in Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic, by Carafa, in another person, with Correa holding a 50% stake. The company was founded on May 20th, 2020 with a registered capital of $779. The bank transactions and accounting invoices were all fabricated to scam Tyler out of his money. At the time, Tyler and Romano were unaware of this and kept demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit shares. When Correa realized he could no longer hide the truth, he decided to resort to murder, according to Romano. The relationship between the four of them was very good. Although she and Tyler lived in Vancouver, they frequently flew to Toronto to dine party and travel with Lucy and Carafa. Tyler considered Carafa a close friend, even buying an apartment in Toronto and planning to move there from Vancouver when the business improved. 10 days before the incident on February 18th, which was KFA's birthday, Romano said that she and Tyler gave him a diamond necklace. A week before that, Carafa had texted them about a planned trip to Italy in June. Just a few days before the incident, Lucy visited Romano's apartment in Toronto. The two had a great time chatting with Lucy, even asking Romano about her pregnancy and plans for a baby shower. Little did Romano know that Lucy would betray her so soon after Romano recounted that. On the day of the incident, she and Tyler arranged to meet Lucy and Carafa at the industrial area to check out a warehouse. Carafa had told them that the warehouse belonged to Lucy's mother, and they planned to lease it for cannabis cultivation. The plan was for all four of them to wait for the real estate agent, inspect the warehouse together, and sign the lease. If it was suitable that afternoon, Tyler drove the Range Rover with Romano to the warehouse, according to Romano after meeting Lucy and Carafa. They chatted while waiting for the real estate agent after about 20 minutes with no sign of the agent. It started to get dark and light snow began to fall, so Tyler and Romano returned to the Range Rover to warm up to facilitate conversation with Lucy and Carrea outside. Tyler rolled down both side windows of the car, noticing that Lucy was shivering from the cold. Tyler invited her to sit in the driver's seat to warm up while he stepped outside to talk with Carafa. Romano recalled that when Lucy got into the car, she kept her head down. Typing on her phone, she didn't look up at Romano or engage in conversation. Romano felt that Lucy seemed tense and anxious at that moment. As Romano was trying to make awkward conversation, Lucy suddenly stood up and stepped out of the car. Without closing the door, a gust of cold wind blew in, so Romano instinctively moved from the passenger seat to the driver's seat to adjust the heater. However, before she could do so, Carafa suddenly appeared at the corner of the car holding a gun. Romano said she immediately froze her mouth open in shock but unable to speak. 3 shots rang out, one hitting her in the chest. Romano reacted by putting the car in reverse and pressing the gas pedal almost simultaneously. She heard Tyler shouting outside the car, followed by a series of gunshots. When Romano opened her eyes again, the car had crashed into a wall and come to a stop in a desperate bid to survive. She endured the pain and tried to crawl forward, fortunately being discovered and assisted by Annette Bride. Based on the available evidence for days after the incident, the police issued a warrant and released images of Carafa and Lucy, hoping the public could provide information about their whereabouts. Lucy's mother, through a lawyer, issued a statement saying that Lucy was a sensible girl and expressed hope that she would soon contact the police to cooperate with the investigation by checking the surveillance cameras at Lucy's apartment. The police found footage of Lucy and Cara in the elevator at 2:46 p.m. on the day of the incident. Less than an hour later, at 3:33 p.m., Lucy reappeared in different clothes, her face covered and wearing a blonde wig. It's likely that Carafa used the emergency stairwell to avoid being caught on camera. Considering they lived on the 34th floor, KFA's descent must have been time-consuming and strenuous. After completing the murder plan at the industrial area, the two drove the Audi and Range Rover to different locations to abandon them. Lucy then drove a gray SUV with Carrea back to their apartment around 1:30 a.m. on March 1st at 2:48 a.m. The apartment's elevator camera in Toronto captured Carafa holding a black trash bag with his back to the camera, while Lucy, wearing a mask, appeared slightly panicked. At this point, they were preparing to leave Canada a few hours later at 6:30 a.m. They drove north and stopped at the Grey Orchard General Store in Port Carling. The store clerk Smith recalled that before the store opened at 7 a.m., a gray SUV had been parked in the lot for some time. About an hour later, a young couple leisurely entered the store. They bought some drinks and snacks and then used the store's restroom. In the afternoon, the store owner Chris received a call from the store. His daughter told him that she had found a strange black plastic bag in the trash behind the store, and upon opening it, she discovered some bullets. Inside, Chris immediately called the police. When the investigators arrived, they found a pair of blood-stained pants, a hat, a blonde wig, and 40 rounds of 9mm ammunition in the bag. Upon investigation, the police discovered that these bullets matched those found at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, the suspects had long since fled. The question was, in a small place like Port Carling, where could they have escaped to buy car by investigating local taxi companies? The police found that at 6:50 a.m. on March 1st. Shortly after parking at the general store, the pair had ordered a taxi when they tracked down the taxi driver. From that morning, he reported that the two initially planned to go to the bus station, intending to take a bus directly to Montreal Airport. However, when the driver mentioned that the bus wouldn't get them to their flight on time, the couple paid him $400 to take them straight to Toronto. Instead, the taxi driver recalled that he dropped them off at a subway station in Toronto. Surveillance cameras at the subway station captured their images at 9:48 a.m. On March 1st, continuing their investigation, the police discovered that the pair took the subway from Toronto to Montreal, eventually boarding a plane at 4:40 p.m. The same day, based on the information gathered, the police believe that approximately 24 hours after murdering Tyler Pratt and attempting to murder Romano Oliver Carafa, and Lucy fled from Canada to Eastern Europe on March the 26th, 2021. Hamilton police officially issued an international arrest warrant for Carafa and Lucy. They also reached out to various European media outlets, hoping the public could provide further information about the suspects. 3 months after the public manhunt, the police finally received good news on June 12, 2021. Hungarian police announced the successful capture of the two fugitives in Budapest. The capital of Hungary, Canadian police expressed their gratitude for Hungary's assistance in the case. To apprehend the couple, Hungary had even deployed a special task force from the Fast Fugitive Active Search Team unit. After gathering reliable information, they discovered that the two had been in Hungary for at least 2 weeks. Following a period of covert surveillance of Carafa and Lucy, the task force decided to move in and arrest the couple on the night of June 12, 2021. The central area of District 6 in Budapest was bustling. As usual, amid the crowd under the night lights were Carafa and Lucy. When the two appeared on 7th Avenue east of the Danube River, the special task force moved in and successfully apprehended them. Subsequent investigations revealed that after fleeing Canada, they flew from Montreal to Frankfurt, Germany. They then traveled to KFA's homeland Slovakia and hid at a relative's house, living there for a while using fake Slovakian identification. Realizing their situation was becoming precarious, they fled to the neighboring Czech Republic. Eventually hiding in Prague after the capture, Carafa refused extradition and appealed to the court, indicating his intention to resist to the end. Meanwhile, Lucy, perhaps tired of running, calmly accepted Canada's extradition request. She even seemed proud when she told the investigators that the Canadian police didn't need to pay for her plane ticket because her mother could hire a jet to bring her back and the police could accompany her naturally. The police flatly refused her boastful offer a month after her arrest on July 12, 2021. When Lucy was escorted by plane back to the Hamilton police station in Canada during the interrogation, Lucy fabricated numerous exaggerated stories throughout this process. She appeared very relaxed and calm, seemingly unaware of the severity of her crimes. She even laughed. Loudly at times, not at all resembling someone accused of first-degree murder. Even those visiting the police station to pay speeding fines seemed more uncomfortable than she did. Lucy claimed that on the day of the incident, she was actually on the other side of the parking lot in the industrial area and was not with Carafa, so she had no idea what he had done. After hearing gunshots, Carafa ran over to her and said that Tyler had tried to kill him, forcing him to act in self-defense. Carafa told her it was a kill or be killed situation, so he had to shoot Tyler to protect himself. Considering Tyler's connections to the underworld, Lucy said she feared that Tyler's associates would come after her, so she felt compelled to flee with Carafa. Meanwhile, in Hungary, after numerous court sessions, the Budapest Court of Appeals ultimately rejected KFA's appeal, and he was subsequently extradited to Canada to face trial. As for Lucy, the Supreme Court of Canada granted her bail on January 20th, 2022. The bail amount was set at 2.7 million Canadian dollars, with her mother posting $2 million and two friends providing the remaining $700,000. However, for months later, Lucy was arrested again. This time, it wasn't because her trial date had arrived, but because she had flagrantly violated her bail conditions. Police reported that on May 20th, Lucy seriously breached two conditions. First, she left her home without permission to meet friends, and second, she contacted someone she was expressly forbidden by the court to communicate with. So Lucy spent $2.7 million for 4 months of freedom. Do you think it was worth it? 3 years after the crime, in April 2024, the trial of Lucy and Carafa finally began in court. Lucy's lawyer claimed that Romano was previously a stripper. After meeting Tyler, she began living a lavish lifestyle funded by her boyfriend's money, frequently dining at upscale restaurants and flying first class to Los Angeles and Dubai. Romano admitted that all her living expenses, including the Range Rover and the Toronto apartment, were paid for by Tyler with drug money. After the Range Rover was damaged, she even received a $90,000 insurance payout. Now that her SCE of money is gone and she lost the baby, it's clear that Romano harbors deep resentment towards Lucy and Carafa given her profession, and her resentment. Can the testimony of such a person be deemed reliable? Meanwhile, Lucy's lawyer portrayed her as a simple, even naive and kind-hearted individual, according to the testimony. When Lucy learned that Tyler wanted Carafa's help to import young girls from Prague to Vancouver, she immediately recognized it as a disguised form of prostitution and human trafficking. Therefore, she firmly refused this proposal and did not allow Carafa to engage in illegal activities. On the other hand, prosecutor Mardine was equally resolute. He pointed out that Lucy's life insurance agent license had expired in 2019, so she could not legally sell any insurance products. She was fully aware that she was creating fake checks that could not be converted into money. Additionally, the prosecutor called an important witness. Fei Yong testified that he had known Carafa for 10 years, and they were very close friends previously. They had worked together at a cafe where Fei Young was a chef, and Carafa was a counter manager. About a week before the shooting, Carafa had asked him for a favor. Carafa said that on February 28th, he and his wife Lucy would have an important and highly confidential business meeting. Specifically, Carafa asked Fei Young and Lucy to swap their phone SIM cards for a few hours and then switch them back. After the meeting was over at 3 p.m. on February 28th, Fei Young arrived at Lucy and KFA's apartment as agreed to swap SIM cards with Lucy when he left Carafa. Also left his phone behind. This meant that when Carafa went to the crime scene, he did not have his phone with him. While Lucy carried a phone with Feng's SIM card inside, Carafa thought that when the police traced the phone records, they would see the couples near the apartment, thereby excluding them as suspects. However, what they didn't anticipate was that their car was clearly captured by a camera opposite the industrial area, and several images showed Lucy's face. Additionally, Fei Young did not stay at Lucy's apartment all night. In court, Fei Young testified that he initially planned to swap the SIM cards back at 7:00 p.m. But Carafa and Lucy were late. According to Fei Young's testimony, he waited for Carafa and Lucy to return home, but they never showed up. Feng had to attend a friend's birthday party, so when he could no longer wait, he left KFA's phone in the apartment and took Lucy's phone and SIM card with him when he went out as a result. And 9 months after the crime, in December 2021, a large police team raided Fei Young's apartment, charging him with first-degree murder, leaving him utterly terrified. Once he understood the situation, Feng decided to testify in court. Additionally, the prosecutor presented the testimony of a man named Mohammed Murad. According to Mohammed, he voluntarily contacted the police on March 1st. He explained that a few weeks before the crime, he had seen an online advertisement posted by Karaya to sell a gray Mercedes SUV. Attracted by the low price, Mohammed traveled from Montreal to Toronto to inspect the car. Apparently, the negotiation over the car's price became too intense, and they couldn't reach an agreement. However, Carafa mentioned that he also wanted to sell a Range Rover and an Audi Q5, which were the two vehicles used in the crime. Notably, this conversation happened in early February, indicating that Carafa had planned the murder well in advance. With his skilled bargaining, Mohammed managed to negotiate an incredibly low price, securing both vehicles for just 4,000 Canadian dollars, an unbelievably low price for two cars worth tens of thousands of dollars. According to the testimony, Carafa told Mohammed that the two vehicles were illegal. He instructed Mohammed to either smuggle the cars out of the country or dismantle them for parts. The agreed date for Mohammed to pick up the vehicles was March 1st. One day after the crime, however, at 7 p.m. On the day of the crime, KFA texted Mohammed stating that both vehicles had been damaged in crashes and could no longer be smuggled out of country. Therefore, they could only be dismantled for parts. Carafa proactively offered a 50% discount, reducing the price to just 2,000 Canadian dollars for both cars. As a result, when Officer McGarry discovered the Range Rover by the roadside, the next day the tow truck hired by Mohammed had just arrived, was the lead from this tow truck that helped investigators locate Mohammed and subsequently find the abandoned Audi Q5. Prosecutor Mark Dean highlighted that not only did surveillance video confirm Lucy's full involvement in the activities of that day, But text message evidence also showed that Lucy had been part of the entire plan before the crime occurred. While she did not pull the trigger, she assisted Kara in numerous ways, from helping him with the mask fraud scheme to planning the murder. She not only acted as the getaway driver, but also lent Karoff money to purchase the Audi used in the crime, and ultimately helped him dispose of evidence and flee together. According to the prosecutor, Lucy undoubtedly participated in the crime and lied numerous times. Leaving him stunned, if he had to use one word to describe Lucy, it would be the perfect accomplice on the defense side. They made a bold final move by allowing Lucy to testify on her own behalf. Lucy stated that she was born in Shenzhen when her parents immigrated to Canada. She and her two sisters were left in the care of relatives in China. Her father opened a driving school in Canada, and 2 years later, her mother started a financial company when the family's financial situation improved. The three sisters were brought to Canada. Lucy attended Harvard Collegiate Institute for high school. She met Karafa when she was in the 9th grade, and he was in the 11th grade, having recently immigrated from Slovakia. They had a brief romantic relationship during high school, but they broke up by the time Lucy graduated. Aided at 17. After high school, Lucy enrolled at the University of Western Ontario and later transferred to Ryerson University. Unfortunately, she was short of 4 credits and did not complete her degree. Lucy stated that she and Karafa reunited when she was 23 years old. After their second date, they began living together on May 16, 2020 a year. Before the crime, Lucy and Karafa were at the airport preparing to fly to Slovakia. However, they encountered a new wave of COVID-19 before boarding. They were informed that if Lucy wanted to get on the plane, she had only one option to become a Slovak citizen. Immediately, the only way to do that at the time was to get married on the spot, so they registered for marriage online and went from being a couple to being husband and wife. Just before boarding the plane, regarding the day of the crime, Lucy said it was no different from any other day. She woke up, went downstairs with her husband Karafa for breakfast, and discussed their plans for the day. In the evening, she had planned to visit her mother, Leoiwayi, for dinner with her and her sisters. She hadn't seen her mother in a while, and she was sure her mother would ask if she wanted to consider helping with the family business during the day, since Correa didn't have a driver's license. He asked Lucy to drive him to a friend's house. Karafa mentioned he intended to buy an Audi Q5 from this friend to modify and then sell. Lucy said she didn't find anything unusual at the time and never imagined that they involved in a murder. She explained that ever since she had known Karafa, he had always been involved in modifying and reselling cars. Lucy stated that after the crime occurred while they were on the run, Karafa finally told her that he had decided to act first at the industrial area. He planned to tell Tyler that all the previous business profits were fake. When Tyler got angry and a fight ensued, Karafa would draw his gun and kill both Romano and Tyler. Lucy described KFA's plan as a premeditated act of self-defense, in summary under her lawyers. Careful guidance, Lucy tried to distance herself entirely from Karafa. However, her story had many holes and failed to convince the jury. Finally, after a grueling 7-week trial on May 24, 2024, the jury unanimously found Karafa and Lucy guilty of first-degree murder of Tyler and attempted murder of Romano. The judge sentenced both to 25 years to life in prison and banned them from driving after the verdict. Both declared their intent to appeal and have since filed the necessary paperwork, while it's uncertain if Lucy and Karafa will succeed in their appeals. If the sentence stands, Lucy could be released when she's 50 years old. Although Lucy didn't achieve the success her mother envisioned both academically and career-wise had she chosen a different partner, perhaps she wouldn't have ended up on this destructive path. Story 5, they were a kind-hearted Chinese couple after years of hard work. They rose from nothing to become successful individuals in life, owning multiple properties in the Houston area. These two were considered a symbol of the American dream in China. However, in just one night, with the sound of 2 gunshots, all the good things turned to dust. The couple was found dead in their mansion. Discovered only 3 days later, this case outraged the local Chinese community. Alongside their fear for their own safety, many asked, how could such heinous criminals act with such impunity? Why did such kind and hardworking people have to face this tragedy? Let's go back in time to 2018 in the city of Houston, located in southern Texas near the Gulf of Mexico. Houston is the largest city in Texas and the fourth largest in the United States, with the fifth largest metropolitan area in the country and a population of over 2.3 million people. The city is known for its strong energy, aerospace, and maritime industries. The Port of Houston is not only the busiest port in the United States, but also ranks sixth in the world. This is a culturally diverse city with a thriving African American community. Houston attracts a large number of African Americans, making up over 22% of the population. Additionally, 6.88% of the population is of Asian descent. Among them were Mr. Ba and his wife Jenny Lam, a very successful 61-year-old Chinese couple. Besides their mansion and several properties, they own 6 Subway restaurants in the Houston area, and their business was thriving. Their children were also outstanding and had their own successful careers with a harmonious family. Successful careers and abundant wealth. They lived a fulfilling life, admired and respected by many. However, achieving this success was undoubtedly challenging. Mr. Ba was born in May 1956 in a modest family in Vernon, LA. With a large family, his childhood was not affluent. In 1972, the family decided to move to the United States in search of better opportunities. He moved to California with his family, studied, and became an electrician. After graduating, his meeting with his wife was filled with romance. Jenny Lam was born on July 6, 1956 in Taiwan. She moved to LA with her family when she was young. Being the same age, she and Mr. Bao attended the same school in LA and had known each other since then. In 1972, Jenny Lam also moved to the United States, with her family attending high school in Atlanta, Georgia, and university in Los Angeles, California. It was in Los Angeles, while they were both university students, that they reunited. Being Chinese old friends and sharing similar experiences, they connected well, eventually leading to their marriage. After getting married, they decided to move to Houston at that time. Mr. Bo worked at the Houston Power Company, while Jenny Lam worked at a Chinese restaurant. Both were very hardworking, often juggling multiple jobs. They were hopeful about their future and had clear plans. Saving money was their first step. Not long after, they had 2 children, a son, Richard, and a daughter, Michelle. This strengthened their resolve to build a successful career in the U.S., ensuring a good environment for their children's education and upbringing. After many years of hard work and frugal living, they finally accumulated a significant amount of savings. In 1984, the couple decided to take a risk and use part of their savings to purchase a franchise for an ice cream shop. They had always dreamed of owning their own business and had worked hard to save for this goal after acquiring their own store. Mr. Bo and his wife worked even harder. Despite this being their first business venture and feeling anxious, their initial decision proved to be wise. Under their dedicated management, the business thrived and their income steadily increased. Buoyed by their initial success, they considered expanding. One ice cream shop was not enough, so they began exploring other business opportunities. Jenny Lam had previously worked in a restaurant, gaining valuable experience. Running the ice cream shop also gave them a deeper understanding of the food industry. Thus, they decided to continue growing in this sector. After some research, they chose to franchise Subway, an American fast food chain known for its sandwiches. Subway was growing rapidly and had become one of the largest fast food brands in the world. Initially, they franchised one Subway store. Once the business stabilized, they continued to expand gradually. They grew from 1 store to 2 by 2018. They owned 6 Subway stores, achieving remarkable success during their career growth. Mr. Bao purchased a mansion in the North Forest residential area of Harris County, Houston. This is a high-end gated community with only 18 homes in his section, offering excellent security. Besides the mansion, they also owned a silver Porsche to outsiders. It seemed that the Bayao family, living in a mansion and driving a luxury car, must have lived an extremely lavish life in reality. Mr. Bao and his wife remained hard-working and frugal. Their son-in-law noted that their lifestyle was far from extravagant. Their favorite dinner was just a $4.99 special meal. Despite their success and fame within the local Chinese community, they never showed arrogance and always treated everyone with warmth and sincerity to their employees. They did not act like bosses, but were always supportive, helping them in both work and life. Employees at their restaurants often said that Mr. Bao and his wife felt more like family than employers. In terms of charity, the couple invested a significant amount of time and money into the local Buddhist association. They actively participated in building a temple in Houston and were veteran volunteers in various subsequent activities, despite their growing and busy business. Unlike many other successful people who are strict with their children, Mr. Ba only wished for his children to be comfortable and happy, not wanting them to work too hard. Their children were also very understanding and did not rely on their parents, each having their own careers. Their son Richard joined the military while their daughter Michelle became an outstanding dentist. However, no one could have predicted that amidst their success, greedy eyes were targeting them on January 11, 2018. The family of four had a pleasant dinner out afterwards. Mr. Bo and his wife drove home. Richard went on a short cruise and Michelle returned into her own home. 2 days later, on the evening of the 13th, Richard felt something was wrong. He hadn't been able to reach his parents for 2 consecutive days. Although he knew they were busy managing 6 restaurants daily, they had never failed to answer their phones or reply to messages like this. Trusting his intuition, he drove to his parents' house as soon as he got off the boat. When no one answered the door and he saw a chaotic scene through the window, he immediately called the police at 9 p.m. The police arrived at the scene, seeing the disorder inside. Through the window, they did not hesitate to break in. They found the drawers and cabinets open with belongings scattered everywhere. All the jewelry, wallets, watches, cash, and valuables were gone. It was clear to anyone that this was a case of burglary and robbery. Strangely, some ordinary items like coffee cups and even coasters were taken. More disturbingly, the police found Mr. Bo and his wife lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Both had no pulse and had been dead for some time. After an examination, the forensic team confirmed that the couple had died about 3 days earlier. The cause of death was gunshot wounds, with both victims shot in the head, highlighting the brutality of the perpetrators. Additionally, their hands and feet were bound, indicating they had endured torture before their deaths. The police speculated that the intruders tied them up to force them to reveal the location of valuables or bank account passwords based on the available clues. This was classified as a home invasion robbery and murder. Richard noted that the assailant likely targeted the caches. Parents kept each night. They collected cash from their 6 restaurants and brought it home before depositing it in the bank the next day. Moreover, one of their restaurants had been robbed at gunpoint just a week earlier, possibly by the same criminals. The case shocked the local community upon its revelation first. This was a high-end gated community with only 18 homes and its own security system where such a violent crime seemed unlikely. Second, Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam were well known and highly respected in the area. Having made significant contributions to the community, they were seen as influential figures who always maintained good relations with everyone. Friends and neighbors had nothing but praise for them, who could be so cruel as to murder such kind-hearted people at a press conference. Police Chief Ed Gonzalez expressed his deep outrage. He recounted the journey of Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam from immigrating to the U.S. with nothing becoming successful. He said Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam exemplified the American dream. We must punish the perpetrators severely. We, along with Mr. B.A. and Jenny Lam's family, mourn this loss deeply. We also thank everyone who has supported our community. We are committed to bringing these criminals to justice and restoring peace to our community. Following the press conference, the police launched a comprehensive investigation. Although there were no witnesses to the crime, the security camera at the gate was fortunate. Working well, the police retrieved footage from the surveillance camera which showed a black Lincoln car arriving at the community gate at 8:20 p.m. On January 11th, after circling once the car stopped near the gate, 2 men then exited the vehicle. One wore a gray shirt, 2-ton pants, and a hat pulled down to his eyes. His walk appeared strange, possibly due to a limp. The other man wore dark clothing and did not disguise himself. The surveillance footage clearly showed that the man with the hat was a tall black man. The 2 men squeezed through a gap under the iron gate to enter the community and headed straight to Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam's house. It was evident they had scouted the location beforehand. this was a planned crime, a third man then appeared, bringing the total number of perpetrators to 3:20 minutes later after having dinner with their family. Mr. Bao and his wife drove home. It was supposed to be a routine return home like any other day. They had no idea that 3 ruthless robbers were hiding near their garage. Although the camera didn't capture what happened next based on the available clues, the police speculated that the sequence of events might have been as follows. After Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam got out of their car, the 3 men quickly overpowered them and dragged them into the house. Although their initial goal was money, their cruel nature meant they had no intention of sparing the couple. The robbers tied up the victims and tortured them to reveal the location of valuables and bank account passwords. After getting the information they wanted, they decided to shoot the 3 robbers, then ransacked the house, taking everything of value. Even the Porsche wasn't spared. Surveillance footage showed the Porsche leaving at 2:30 a.m. The next morning, over the next 2 days, the criminals returned to Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam's house 6 times, with the stolen car taking everything usable and nearly cleaning out the house. They even took the coffee cups and coasters. Their bold and reckless actions demonstrated a complete disregard for being caught, showing their utter contempt for the law. Richard, the victim's son, said, "However, 2 men broke into their homes last week. They killed them in cold blood. My father and mother would have given them anything. They knew how precious life was. They knew how precious time was, and they didn't even give them the chance to give them what they wanted." On January 14, 2018, the police found Mr. Bao Porsche in a remote parking lot. It was clear that the perpetrators had abandoned the car there, although finding the car in the original crime scene allowed for thorough examination to uncover traces like fingerprints or hair. This process was slow, even if such evidence was found. DNA and fingerprint comparisons would still be needed, by which time the criminals might have fled compared to the car in the house. The strongest evidence in the police's possession was the surveillance video. Unfortunately, the video was blurry, making it difficult to immediately identify the perpetrators. To solve the case quickly, the police decided to release part of the surveillance video to the public and offered a $5,000 reward, hoping the public would provide leads. This tactic proved effective. A viewer who watched the surveillance video quickly identified the 3 men as Carrie Kendrick, 23, his half-brother Ula Kendrick, 21, and Eric Peralta, 20. The reason these 3 were recognized so quickly was because Carrie was well known. Locally, he had been an outstanding high school basketball player, standing at 7 feet 3 inches tall. The tall man in the surveillance video was clearly him. However, what made Carrie infamous was not his height, but his criminal record. Carrie was a known thief who had been sentenced to 30 years in prison for at least 20 home burglaries. However, he was released on parole after serving only 3 years. His leg injury, which caused him to limp, was the result of a fight in prison requiring a 10-day hospital stay. Just 2 months after his release, he resumed his criminal activities. Once the suspects' identities were confirmed, the next steps became easier. The police began planning their arrest during this time. They also received numerous tips from the public. One tip reported seeing the suspects driving the silver Porsche to the apartment complex at 130 to 35 Winfern Road, where they unloaded various items from the car. The police quickly located the building and discovered that one of the apartments belonged to suspect Wool with a search warrant. They found many valuable items inside the apartment on January 17th. The police finally arrested all 3 suspects. When arrested, Eric displayed a defiant attitude facing reporters. Questions, he responded, "If you're here to arrest me, just do it." When Carrie was arrested, the police found a significant amount of jewelry in his car, which was later confirmed to have been stolen from Mr. B.A. and Jenny Lam's home. In response to reporters' questions, he said, "I am very sorry for what happened," implicitly admitting his guilt. However, Carr's mother, Marcia, insisted that after being beaten in prison, Carr's limbs still didn't function properly, making it impossible for him to have planned and carried out the crime or pulled the trigger himself. She believed he must have been coerced or forced. Her youngest son, Ula, had always been well-behaved with no criminal record, a stable job, and a loving girlfriend. She was certain he couldn't have initiated the crime. Either in her view, her sons were not the masterminds, but this was just one side of the story. And the police were not easily convinced. They charged all three suspects with 2 counts of first-degree murder, home invasion robbery, and other related offenses. All three pleaded not guilty. They were held in jail awaiting trial with bail set at $350,000 each to prevent them from escaping. Justice Eric's family managed to raise enough money to post his bail, and he was released from jail. This caused a public outcry as many felt uneasy about having such a dangerous individual back in society. Richard openly expressed his dissatisfaction and anger, arguing that it was unacceptable to allow a murderer back into the community. However, the court did not alter the bail conditions. Despite the public's opposition, unexpectedly, Eric squandered his opportunity. He attempted to contact a witness, which led to his rearrest and subsequent return to jail, this time without the possibility of bail. On January 28, 2018, a memorial service for Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam was held at the Houston Funeral Home. Richard, his sister Michelle, many friends, relatives, and devoted members of the Chinese community attended to bid farewell the abbot of Jade Buddha. Temple Houston also attended to chant prayers due to the overwhelming number of attendees exceeding several hundred people. Many had to stand in the hallway and watch the service via video at the memorial. Family and friends reminisced about the step-by-step business journey of Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam, sharing warm and touching moments from the past. No one present remained unmoved by the tragic loss. Their unjust deaths were truly heartbreaking. Meanwhile, the trial of the 3 suspects was repeatedly delayed. The reason for the delays is unclear, but the timing suggests it might be related to the COVID-19 pandemic during the prolonged wait. Carey confessed to the crime, although he did not reveal all the details. He confirmed that the other 2 were also involved. Additionally, the police discovered another case of robbery and kidnapping just 10 miles away from Mr. Bo and Jenny Lam's home in Tambol. Another family was robbed of over 20 Louis Vuitton bags and other items. This incident occurred 2 days before the murder of Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam, leading the police to suspect the same 3 individuals were responsible in May 2022, for years after the crime cars trial finally began. Given the clear evidence, a conviction was certain, leaving only the sentencing to be determined. Ultimately, considering the perpetrator's callousness and brutality towards the victim, Carey was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Next, Eric was also convicted of murder and received a life sentence. As for Ul Kar's younger brother, court records indicate that his trial began in October. However, strangely, the verdict has yet to be announced given the circumstances of the case. It is likely that he too will receive a life sentence after the verdict. Richard said they need to spend the rest of their lives in prison to reflect on what they've done. I don't think they should ever return to society. The prosecutor in the case also stated Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam were exemplary figures of hard work rising from nothing to live a prosperous life, serving as a model for many residents of Houston. What they endured was a horrific tragedy for such reckless and blatant disregard for human life. Life imprisonment without parole is just. Although the case has been adjudicated, details about the crime's execution remain undisclosed. Who planned it, who pulled the trigger, and how they targeted Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam were not revealed in detail. On November 16, 2021, marking the 4-year anniversary of Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam's murder, a memorial service was held at the square outside Houston City Hall. The abbot of Jade Buddha Temple Houston, along with many Buddhists, once again gathered to chant prayers. Hundreds of people wearing special commemorative white T-shirts held candles and prayed for Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam during the memorial service. The children of Mr. Bay and Jenny Lam each gave speeches expressing their gratitude for the ongoing support and assistance from everyone. Then a close friend of the couple for 35 years said Mr. Bao could walk into a room full of strangers, and by the time he walked out, everyone in that room was his friend. That's just how wonderful Mr. Ba was. In the years following the case, news of Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam's murder had a profound impact on the Chinese community in the United States. Houston police later analyzed that the primary reason they became targets was because they were of Asian descent for many years, from Los Angeles and Houston to New York and even across the Atlantic in London and Paris. Young African Americans have often targeted the Asian community. Somehow, the Chinese community has come to be seen as wealthy in the eyes of some African American criminals. As a result, similar home invasions and robberies have occurred frequently, with many incidents involving the murder of elderly individuals. The execution-style killing like that of Mr. B.A. and Jenny Lam were not isolated cases. Houston, with its relatively large African American population, has been particularly dangerous. A series of crimes targeting Asians has not only instilled fear in the Asian community, but also attracted widespread social attention. Members of the Asian community have called for increased community security and additional protective measures from the police. The case raises two significant points for reflection. First, there is the issue of K's prior history. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison for 20 home burglaries, yet he was inexplicably paroled after just 3 years. This is baffling. Attorney Andy expressed extreme anger about this, questioning the parole board on why they released a murderer back into society so quickly and accusing them of misconduct. However, the parole board explained that Key had completed treatment programs and other activities in prison with good behavior, given that it was his first incarceration, his young age, and the fact that he was injured by other inmates. They granted his parole request. The second point concerns the management of the residential community. Mr. Bao and Jenny Lam lived in an upscale neighborhood with only 18 homes, each worth millions of dollars at the time. One would expect such a community to have excellent security measures, but this was not the case. The entrance to the neighborhood was a large iron gate with gaps wide enough for people to slip through. Doug Shannon, the property manager, stated that the gate was intended to restrict vehicle access, not prevent intruders. If someone was determined to commit a crime, they couldn't be stopped. Furthermore, there had been previous thefts in the area indicating significant security shortcomings. Had the residential community's security measures been properly implemented, and had the court not handled Carr's case so leniently by releasing him early, perhaps these tragedies could have been avoided. The State Council Office of China has shown great concern over this incident and issued a series of safety guidelines for Chinese citizens living abroad. They emphasize the importance of precautionary measures, most notably the avoidance of flaunting wealth at the time of the incident. Doug Shannon's home was valued at nearly $1 million. However, due to the murder, the property's value plummeted. Richard did not want to be reminded of the sorrowful events and decided to sell the house. Ultimately, the house was sold for around $500,000. Richard has since retired from the military and begun managing the assets his parents left behind. Despite inheriting a significant fortune, he is deeply saddened whenever he thinks about what his parents endured for him. No amount of money can compensate for the loss of his beloved parents. He reflects that the companionship of his parents was the most precious asset in his life, something he can never regain. Let us take a moment to remember Mr. Ba and Jenny Lam, not just for the tragedy they suffered, but for their admirable lives and contributions to the community.